On the afternoon of November 24th, 1971, the day before Thanksgiving, a man walked into Portland International Airport carrying nothing more than a black attaché case. He approached the Northwest Orient Airlines ticket counter, paid $20 in cash for a one-way ticket to Seattle, and signed the name Dan Cooper. There was no requirement to show identification in 1971, and paying cash for a short domestic flight attracted no attention. A newspaper reporting error in the days that followed transformed Dan Cooper into the name history would remember, D.B. Cooper. The aircraft was Northwest Orient Flight 305, a Boeing 727-100, carrying 36 passengers and 6 crew members. The flight was expected to last just over 30 minutes. The Boeing 727 had become popular because of one unusual feature: a built-in rear boarding stairway beneath the tail. It was designed for airports without jet bridges. No one imagined that feature would soon become central to one of the greatest unsolved mysteries in FBI history. Passengers later described Cooper as a man in his mid-40s, approximately 6 feet tall, weighing around 170 to 180 pounds. He had dark hair, olive complexion, brown eyes, and spoke without any obvious regional accent. He wore a dark business suit, white dress shirt, black loafers, and a narrow black clip-on tie secured with a mother-of-pearl tie clip. Every witness emphasized the same detail: he looked completely ordinary. Cooper selected seat 18C near the rear of the cabin. Flight attendant Florence Schaffner served him a bourbon and soda shortly after boarding. Smoking was still legal aboard commercial aircraft, and Cooper calmly lit a Raleigh cigarette while watching passengers settle into their seats. He was polite, never demanding, and spoke quietly. Nothing about his behavior suggested what was about to happen. At approximately 2:50 p.m., after the aircraft reached cruising altitude, Cooper handed Schaffner a folded handwritten note. Believing it was another passenger attempting to flirt, she slipped it into her purse without opening it. Cooper leaned toward her and quietly said, "Miss, you'd better look at that note. I have a bomb." Schaffner later repeated those exact words to FBI investigators. She unfolded the note. The original message has never been recovered because Cooper reclaimed it, but Schaffner later described its contents in detail. It instructed her to sit beside him because he possessed a bomb inside his briefcase. She complied. Cooper opened the attaché case only a few inches. Inside, Schaffner saw what appeared to be 8 red cylinders, insulated wiring, and a large battery. She later testified that she believed the device was genuine. To this day, investigators have never determined whether the briefcase actually contained an explosive device or an elaborate fake. Unlike nearly every hijacker before or since, Cooper remained remarkably composed. He never shouted. He never stood up. He never threatened passengers. He never displayed a firearm. Crew members consistently described him as courteous, intelligent, and almost emotionless. Even under extraordinary circumstances, his pulse seemed to remain perfectly steady. Cooper quietly dictated his demands. He wanted $200,000 in $20 bills, equivalent to well over $1 million today. He requested 4 parachutes, 2 primary parachutes and 2 reserve parachutes. Finally, he instructed that a fuel truck be waiting upon arrival in Seattle so the aircraft could depart immediately after the exchange. Schaffner carefully wrote everything down before delivering the message to Captain William Scott. Scott immediately contacted Seattle Air Route Traffic Control. Within minutes, the FAA, the FBI, Northwest Orient executives, Seattle police, and local banks were coordinating a response. Authorities made a deliberate decision to comply rather than risk the lives of the passengers and crew. Meanwhile, almost no one in the passenger cabin realized anything unusual was happening. People continued reading newspapers, business travelers reviewed paperwork, others simply watched Western Washington pass beneath the aircraft. The atmosphere remained so calm that several passengers later told investigators they had no idea they had been aboard a hijacked airplane until after landing. Captain Scott informed Cooper that assembling $200,000 in cash and locating 4 parachutes would require time. According to cockpit recordings and crew interviews, Cooper accepted the delay without argument. He simply instructed the pilots to remain airborne. For nearly 2 hours, Flight 305 entered holding patterns over the Puget Sound region while authorities raced to satisfy his demands. The ransom money was gathered from Seattle area banks. FBI agents painstakingly photographed every bundle and recorded the serial numbers of all the $10,020 bills, hoping the money might someday identify the hijacker. Flight 305 touched down at Seattle-Tacoma International Airport at approximately 5:39 p.m. Following Cooper's instructions, the aircraft taxied to a remote section of the runway, away from the terminal and illuminated as little as possible. Cabin shades were lowered. Interior lights were dimmed. Cooper insisted that no police approach the aircraft and that anyone delivering the ransom remain out of sight. A Northwest Orient representative carried the $200,000 ransom to the aircraft along with 4 parachutes. FBI agents had already photographed every bundle of cash and recorded the serial numbers of all $10,020 bills, hoping they might someday reveal Cooper's identity. Flight attendant Tina Mucklow delivered the money and parachutes to Cooper. After carefully inspecting them, he appeared satisfied. He then did something few expected. He released every passenger. All 36 passengers walked safely off the aircraft, along with flight attendant Florence Schaffner. Most had no idea they had just survived one of the most famous hijackings in American history. Only Captain William Scott, First Officer William Ratazak, Flight Engineer Harold Anderson, and Flight Attendant Tina Mucklow remained aboard. The next phase of Cooper's plan was even more unusual. He ordered the crew to fly toward Mexico City, but under strict conditions. The Boeing 727 was to remain below 10,000 feet, fly no faster than approximately 170 knots, keep the landing gear down, maintain 15 degrees of wing flap, and leave the cabin unpressurized. Pilots immediately recognized the challenge. No commercial flight normally operated that way for hundreds of miles. The aircraft would burn fuel rapidly and require another refueling stop long before reaching Mexico. After discussing the limitations with Cooper, both sides agreed to stop first in Reno, Nevada. At 7:40 p.m., Flight 305 departed Seattle. Unknown to Cooper, 2 F-106 Delta Dart fighter aircraft from McCord Air Force Base had already taken off to shadow the Boeing. One flew above the airliner while another flew below in an attempt to remain unseen. A Lockheed T-33 trainer also joined the search. Despite the military response, none of the pilots ever saw Cooper leave the aircraft. Inside the cabin, Tina Mucklow became Cooper's only companion. Crew interviews later described him as calm and respectful throughout the flight. He never appeared intoxicated, he never rushed, he seemed to know exactly what he was doing. At one point, Cooper instructed Mucklow to show him how to operate the rear air stair. She admitted she had never used it in flight. After reviewing the instructions himself, Cooper appeared to understand the mechanism, without further assistance. Around 8 p.m., he ordered Mucklow into the cockpit and told the crew to close the cockpit door. It would be the last confirmed sighting of the hijacker. The crew could hear movement behind them. Warning lights soon indicated that the rear staircase had been lowered. Captain Scott attempted to communicate through the intercom, asking whether Cooper needed assistance. There was no reply. At approximately 8:13 p.m., somewhere over the forests of southwestern Washington, the aircraft suddenly experienced a noticeable upward movement, followed by a rapid change in air pressure. The crew later described it as a distinct pressure bump. Investigators concluded it was most likely caused by someone jumping from the lowered rear stairs. No one actually witnessed the jump. No radar tracked a falling parachutist. No ground observer reported seeing Cooper descend. The exact location of the jump has never been established with certainty. The flight continued south exactly as instructed. Unsure whether Cooper was still aboard, the pilots maintained course until landing in Reno shortly after 10:15 p.m. Federal agents immediately surrounded the aircraft. With weapons drawn, they searched every compartment. The rear staircase was still lowered. The cabin was empty. Dan Cooper and the $200,000 ransom were gone. Left behind were only a few pieces of evidence. Investigators recovered Cooper's black clip-on tie, its mother-of-pearl tie clip, and 8 cigarette butts reportedly left in the ashtray. The cigarette butts were later lost before DNA technology could examine them, a fact investigators would regret decades later. The tie, however, would remain one of the most important physical pieces of evidence in the case. Modern forensic testing would eventually reveal microscopic particles embedded within its fibers, offering intriguing clues about the man who had worn it. But on that cold November night in 1971, investigators knew only one thing for certain. A man had boarded Flight 305 using the name Dan Cooper. Somewhere between Seattle and Reno, he had simply disappeared. By sunrise on November 25, 1971, one of the largest manhunts in FBI history had begun. The FBI, local sheriff's departments, National Guard units, and military aircraft searched the suspected jump area across the forests of southwestern Washington. Investigators combed logging roads, rivers, mountainsides, and miles of rugged terrain. They expected to find something. They found nothing. No parachute, no body, no briefcase, no clothing, no trace of the man calling himself Dan Cooper. The investigation was officially named NORJAK, short for Northwest Hijacking. Over the next 45 years, the FBI would receive more than 1,000 serious suspects and process thousands of additional tips from around the world. One question divided investigators almost immediately. Could Cooper have survived? Many experienced parachutists believed the odds were poor. He jumped on a cold November night into unfamiliar mountainous terrain while wearing loafers, a business suit, and a trench coat. Winds were strong, visibility was limited, and temperatures at altitude were well below freezing. Others argued Cooper appeared too prepared to be dismissed as an amateur. He had specifically demanded 4 parachutes instead of 1. FBI investigators later concluded he may have done this intentionally, reasoning authorities would be reluctant to sabotage the equipment if they believed he might force a hostage to accompany him. Investigators also noted that Cooper understood enough about the Boeing 727 to request a flight profile suitable for parachuting. Whether that knowledge came from military service, aviation experience, or careful research has never been determined. The strongest physical evidence remained aboard Flight 305. Cooper's black clip-on tie and tie clip had been left on his seat before the jump. Decades later, modern forensic analysis detected microscopic particles of titanium, stainless steel, and other specialized metals embedded in the fabric. Some independent researchers suggested these particles were consistent with industries such as aerospace manufacturing or advanced metal fabrication during the late 1960s. The findings were intriguing. They were never enough to identify a suspect. Then, nearly 9 years after the hijacking, the case changed dramatically. On February 10, 1980, 8-year-old Brian Ingram was digging in the sand at Tana Bar along the Columbia River when he uncovered 3 decaying bundles of $20 bills. The FBI compared the serial numbers. Every bill matched Cooper's ransom. The discovery totaled $5,800. It remains the only confirmed portion of the ransom money ever recovered. How the money reached Tana Bar remains one of the greatest mysteries of the case. Some researchers believe river currents carried the bills downstream. Others argue they were deliberately buried. Despite decades of study, no explanation has gained universal acceptance. Over the years, investigators examined numerous suspects. Among the best known were Richard Floyd McCoy Jr., Kenneth Christiansen, Dwayne Weber, and Robert Rackstraw. Each appeared promising for a time, yet every theory ultimately conflicted with documented evidence, fingerprints, timelines, or other investigative findings. No suspect has ever been charged. Advances in forensic science periodically revived the investigation. DNA testing was attempted using material recovered from Mort Cooper's tie, but the sample was incomplete and insufficient to identify a single individual with confidence. Fingerprints collected from the aircraft also failed to produce a definitive match. In July 2016, after 45 years of investigation, the FBI announced it was suspending active work on the NORJAK case. The Bureau stated it would preserve the evidence and continue accepting credible new information, but would dedicate investigative resources elsewhere. More than 50 years later, the mystery remains remarkably intact. No verified ransom money has surfaced beyond the bills found at Tana Bar. No confirmed parachute has ever been recovered. No confession has been substantiated. No identity has been proven. Did Dan Cooper survive the jump and quietly disappear into history? Or did he perish somewhere in the forests of Washington before ever spending a single dollar? The evidence leaves both possibilities open. One ordinary airline ticket, one impossible hijacking, one leap into a storm, and one mystery that continues to challenge investigators, historians, and amateur detectives more than half a century later. Join our quest for answers by subscribing to our channel. If you enjoyed unraveling the mystery in this video, please click the like button. Most of all, thank you for watching.